Deep in north-central New Mexico is the sleepy little town of Dulce. Located on the Archuleta Mesa on the Colorado, New Mexico border, Dulce is home to about 3,000 residents and is the headquarters of the Jicarilla Apache Nation. For as small and insignificant as this remote location may sound, since the 1980s Dulce has been the center of a controversy regarding the so-called alien agenda, rumors of underground tunnels and related conspiracy theories. Underground bases and the alien agenda. At the time, the physicist and inventor Paul Benwitz claimed he had discovered an underground base occupied by extraterrestrials near Dulce. His story quickly spread through the UFO community. Allegations that surround the base include human abductions, alien abductions, by these extraterrestrial beings. He also asserted that the extraterrestrials were engaging in the development of advanced technology including genetic manipulation, all part of their purported alien agenda. Their plan, according to conspiracy theorists, is to control the government and gain ultimate control of the Earth by means of a new world order. There have even been stories of an untoward alliance between humans and the inhabitants of the Dulce base which include ties to shadow governments via secret societies such as the Illuminati, the Masons, the Bilderberg Group and the Skull and Bones. Dulce is not the only place on Earth where it is believed underground bases exist, but it is the one which has received the greatest notoriety in recent times. Subterranean bases, according to conspiracy theorists, can be found around the world with major active outposts all across the United States, Australia, Antarctica, and South America. These theories posit that the underground bases are connected to each other via a series of channels which ensure each base is connected to another. There are even assertions that one of these tunnels leads to an active base beneath the Vatican which has been exerting control over Western civilization for centuries. A wealth of information regarding this subject has recently surfaced that makes sweeping claims. But, as strange as all of this may sound, could any of what they say be true? We turn to mythology in the search for answers. Before we continue, it must be clarified that mythology, like many of the claims that come from the UFO community, is treated more like science fiction rather than fact. Traditional mythologists contend that the gods we find in myth represent the forces of nature or the creation of someone's vivid imagination. With that said, does mythology support these seemingly outlandish claims? Using mythology to understand beliefs in underground realms. Stories of underground realms occupied by the gods pervade mythology. Depending on the culture, it has been called Hades, Tartarus, Xibalba, Duat, Paitala, and Hell. These homes of the gods are not always found deep within the earth, but are sometimes described as being within a mountain or deep beneath the waters of the earth. Access to their domain, regardless of locality, is often described as located through the mouth of a cave. The entrance may appear open at one time and then disappear from view completely and instantaneously. The inhabitants of these underground realms did not desire to be visited by unwanted or unexpected company, yet access was granted to select individuals. Ancient texts described entrance into the underworld as being anything but easy. The Mayan Popol Vuh, for example, describes the route taken by the hero brothers Hunhunahu and Vucubhunapu. It tells of a steep descent into the home of the lords of Xibalba and the many challenges they had to face. Similarly, texts such as the Egyptian Book of the Dead describe the path by which the deceased god-king must travel to enter Duat. Like the Popol Vuh, the path is fraught with challenges the individual must pass in order to enter the realm of the dead, the underworld. P. Vishnu Purana states that the deepest level of the underworld, Paitala, can be found 70,000 yojanas beneath the surface of the earth. Gilgamesh, in the epic bearing his name, is described as traveling 12 leagues in the dense darkness until he arrived in the light-filled chamber of the underworld. In these ancient texts, the underground domains of the gods are described as filled with houses or vast halls where thousands of individuals could assemble. Fountains, plants, Tall grasses, trees and animals of all kinds filled this land. The divine ascetic, Narada, who is featured in the Vishnu Purana, claims to have visited Paitala, stating that Paitala was much more charming than heaven. He exclaimed, "What can be compared with Paitala, where nagas, serpents, are adorned with beautiful and brilliant and pleasure-diffusing gems? This region is embellished with the daughters of Daityas and Danavas." Similar descriptions of the underwater homes of the gods are scattered through mythology. The home of the Sumerian fertility god Enki, which is located in the watery deep, is described as having his house built of gold, silver and lapis lazuli. Even writers, such as Greek philosopher Plato, echo this notion. He believed that the earth was littered with a number of hollows that were full of water, air, trees, fruits and flowers. Surprisingly, Plato confirms yet another claim made by modern ufology. Plato goes on to state that these hollows were connected to one another by subterranean channels. But Plato isn't the only one who refers to tunnels that lie beneath the surface of the earth. Inca legends, for example, tell of vast networks of tunnels that crisscross the length and breadth of the planet, complete with underground cities. When Pizarro and the Spanish conquistadors entered Peru, they kidnapped the Inca emperor Atahualpa and held him for ransom. They demanded enough gold to fill a room in return for Atahualpa's release. Pizarro's men heard rumors that the Inca gold was being held in a vast network of subterranean tunnels. According to legend, these tunnels were thousands of years old and ran for miles beneath the Inca capital. In more recent years, adventurers who have hazarded into the caverns beneath Cusco entered but were never seen again. One man actually did make it out of the tunnels alive, bringing with him 2 bars of gold. According to officials, he had gone mad. In response, the entrances to the tunnels were then walled up for safety's sake, at least that is the official story. Meanwhile, the Apache Indians report that their ancestors took refuge in ancient tunnels during a cataclysmic disaster on the earth. They wandered these immense passageways for years, carrying the seeds for life in the New World. Underground alien-reptilian bases for genetic experiments in mythology. But what about the other claim made by ufologists regarding these bases being used for genetic engineering? According to their assertions, it is in the lowest level, the 7th level, of the Dulce base that the extraterrestrials are engaging in this kind of experimentation. Again, mythology supports this premise, and Native American tribes across the country are the most vocal when it comes to this topic. The Jicarilla Apache, whose headquarters is in Dulce, the Navajo and Hopi Indians have long-standing traditions of man's creation and emergence from beneath the surface of the earth. In fact, the Algonquians recount, thus did the lowermost world cave become overfilled with living things, full of unfinished creatures, crawling like reptiles over one another in dark blackness. In this matter they do not stand alone. Beresis, a Babylonian priest, tells of the hideous creatures that inhabit this underground realm. He described men who had one body but 2 heads, some with the legs and horns of a goat, and even some with the hind quarters of a horse and the body of a man. In short, there were creatures in which were combined the limbs of every species of animal. These genetic experiments are, according to reports from UFO advocates, being conducted by a group of reptilian beings in the lowest levels of the base. Thomas Costello, a former senior security officer at the base, testified that the base at Dulce is a 7-level underground facility with the lower levels described as a series of natural caverns. It was believed by Costello that these caverns were used by different extraterrestrial races in our remote past. In Hindu cosmology, the Naga, serpents, once lived on earth, but the great god Brahma sent them to live under the sea and in the 7th level of their underground realm called Paitala. In the Sumerian Inanna's descent to the netherworld, Inanna is required to pass through 7 gates to finally reach the bowels of the underworld. Aztec legend says that Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, went to Mictlan, the Aztec underworld, and created mankind using his own blood and the bones of the previous race. Throughout mythology, the act of creating humanity is always associated with a specific group of gods, the fertility gods. Fertility gods around the world are traditionally depicted as reptilian or amphibious in nature and appear in art as a blend between a man and a fish or a man and a snake. Reptilians, their alien agenda and related mythology. A number of individuals also argue that the reptilians' true agenda is to control us, with the objective to dominate the planet. They cite the development of a new world order. Proponents of this alien agenda theory believe that the reptilians, or the byproduct of their genetic manipulation experiments, intend to take control of the Earth's surface. This takeover is reportedly being orchestrated by an extremely powerful and influential group which includes many of the world's wealthiest people. Some claim members of this elite group are actually genetically related to each other. Their goal is to have every man, woman and child on the Earth obedient to their covert agenda. The reptilians are also accused of wanting to reduce the population on the Earth and are employing weapons such as chemtrails, GMOs, vaccinations and man-made viruses to reduce our numbers. It is contended that it is easier to control 500,000 or a million individuals than it is the 7 billion who currently live on the Earth. A look into mythology relative to this claim does have a few pillars of support. The idea of culling the human population on Earth is not a modern concept. In the Sumerian epic of Atrahasis, for example, we find a story where the gods do just that. In this myth, 1,200 years after the creation of mankind, the number of people who inhabited the earth grew. Their noise disturbed the sky god Enlil's sleep, who then decided to send a plague in order to reduce the population. This worked for a while, but when another 1,200 years passed, the population had grown again and Enlil was once more bothered by the noise. This time, in order to decrease their numbers, he asked the thunder rain god to hold back the rains, whereby the world suffered from a great drought where vast numbers died. The population continued to grow, and by the time another 1,200 years had passed, the noise became too much for Enlil to bear. Wanting to alleviate his problem, he told the gods to hold back all of nature's gifts. This went on for 6 years, and as the texts describe, the people of Earth were reduced to cannibalism in order to survive. The fertility god, Enki, tried to save the people from starvation, which angered Enlil even more. Finally, in an act of vengeance, Enlil decided to destroy mankind once and for all. He planned to do this by flooding the world. Enki, once again, stepped in and saved humanity from total annihilation. He warned Atrahasis of the impending flood and told him to build a boat to save himself and his family. Torrents of theories have come forward as we seek the truth regarding our place in the universe. Mythology does lend itself to support a number of these claims. It is difficult to determine if the creators of these theories based their conjecture using myth as their foundation, first-hand experiences, or something else. What does seem evident is that much of the information UFO researchers are bringing to light does parallel the myths and legends that have been passed to us from antiquity. Bringing this idea full circle, if the stories being unearthed in the UFO community, such as those about the Dulce base in New Mexico, were not based on mythological sources, yet mythology supports these claims, then the stories of our distant past may have a basis in fact. It implies that the gods were living, breathing beings who walked the earth in our remote past, created man and played an essential role in the development of life and culture on the planet.